Good evening. Shalom, shalom, everybody. Welcome to the Torah portion, which is called, who knows?
Shoftim.
No,
Oh, not Shoftim. No.
Mishpatim.
Mishpatim, right?
It's not far because it comes from shofet.
Yeah.
Shafat,
Mishpatim.
which is a judge.
I knew it was one of the judgments.
Yeah, it's the judgments, exactly. All right, so let me share the screen and let's begin our adventure through. I love this portion, and I love them all. Where are we here? Oh, where'd it go? Here we go, Mishpatim. All right. Hang on, let me do this. And so if you have anything in between that you want to say, feel free to do so. So let's begin to read. Ele hamishpatim, these are the rules, the judgments. Asher tasim, I'm setting before you, lifanechem, the setting before them. Now all these are what's called the ordinances, the judgments that God is giving us. You know, last week in Yitro, Moshe received the 10 Commandments, and well, he heard he's going to go up and get them this week, but he heard the 10 Commandments to give the people, his chosen people, Israel, the purpose of bringing them to humanity. And these are our Constitution, and they are the foundation of all truth and all justice. And the rest, everything else, is commentary. The Mishpatim comes from, as you said, Miriam, the root shafat, which is to judge. And it gives us the idea of justice, human rights, which is something that is being denied to so many people these days. Now, these regulations that we're going to be reading assist us in the application of these commandments in our lives, and they allow us to live in peace and harmony with the rest of the world, with our fellow men. One of the problems is that we humans have created our own set of rules, and we just keep adding and adding and adding to them. And God said, do not add or take away from my words. And the worst aspect is what we see in the justice system, where we set up precedents. And these precedents overrule sometimes justice and truth. And they overrule Torah, which and doesn't allow us to have justice. So, and the thing that's important to understand is, as we read this, you'll see that the Torah is not looking for vengeance or that we seek revenge or that we're vindictive, but that we help people make restitution for what we've done and to reform and change our lives. The Torah teaches us to examine each situation to see how that restitution can be made. And that's what we're going to see. Now, obviously, these are things done at that particular time. So we have to look at it, what it means for today. You know, we're going to see the word Elohim very often. And Elohim is a word for God, but also it can be judges who were to judge fairly and impartially and bring justice to the people. They were the ones who represented our Creator in delivering the system of justice that He set up. So if you look at our justice system in the world today, a lot of it, can we say it's just or is it corrupt?
Peggy,
Yeah.
just on the idea, because what you just said, our justice system isn't just. So from what I understand, precedent, when you base laws on precedent, it means previous judgments that have been made by the judgment system, right? So
Yes.
if they've,
It usually pertains to a particular,
sorry?
it pertains to a particular situation that may have applied to that person, but won't apply to somebody else because what's going on behind the scenes may be a little different.
And it's
But
context, everything.
exactly.
But also there are judgments made that are very contrary to what the Ten Commandments say.
Exactly.
So that's precedent. So it's very dangerous.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
And in these verses, we're going to read from Exodus 21:1 to 24:18, and we're going to see how to create a society with a righteous justice system. And it's important to understand that only the 10 commandments, or these 10 principles that God gave us, those were written in stone by God's hand. They cannot be changed in any shape or form. But the rest, it adjusts according to the times, according to the societies that we're living in. So, and we have to look, like here it says, when you acquire a Hebrew slave, that person shall serve 6 years. So we don't have slaves today, although there are many companies who do have slaves, people who farm out their products to be manufactured in third world countries where these people are paid next to nothing. That's almost like acquiring a slave. But here it's not talking about that. We're talking about a time when slavery was the natural, a normal way of living. And what God was going to be doing now was he doesn't just immediately take us away from the system. He doesn't take us out of immediately. What he does is slowly redirects how we're going to shape that idea and change it. So that person shall serve 6 years and shall go free in the seventh year. So we see that God was setting us free, and he was also going to be he wanted to abolish slavery, but it wasn't going to happen overnight. So if a male slave came single, he would leave single. If he had a wife, his wife will leave with him. If his master gave him a wife, and she bore him children, the wife and her children shall belong to the master, and he shall leave alone. So here, what I understand with this is that justice is for everyone. It's not only for the slave, but it's also for the slave owner. You know, he has a right to keep his own property. That's why it says if he had a wife and she bore him children, the children shall belong to the slave owner, because that was the deal. But
No. Okay.
you were going to say something?
Well, I mean, today that wouldn't be just to separate the kids from the parents, but that was I think you're saying it's part of the system that existed then.
That's part of the system that
So
existed
slowly
then.
God was taking them away from it.
Yeah, but we
Okay.
have to understand also that the master also had rights.
But
Both have
human
rights.
beings those aren't his kids.
They weren't his kids. If it was the master's wife, see, if he came single, if he had a wife when he came, he leaves with him. Richard, are you saying something?
No, no,
All right. Well, if anybody's speaking to
but not
somebody
yet.
else, please put yourself on mute. All right.
Okay. Can you hear traffic? I just have to pull over and make sure I'm on mute. So hold on a second. I just have to make sure I'm on mute. So bear with me.
I'll put
Okay.
you on
Okay,
mute.
keep going.
I'll put you on
Yeah.
mute,
Okay. Good.
Jerry.
Good.
Richard, okay? And I'll put you to Jerry on mute. And if you want to speak, just unmute yourself. It'll make it simpler. Okay, so here we go. So do you understand what I'm saying, Miriam? If he came single, he leaves single.
Right.
If he came with a wife, he leaves with his wife. But if the master gave him a wife, the wife is also a slave. The slave belongs to the master. So
Even
everybody
if they're
in,
not his kids, the kids are not his kids. They should belong to if the slave and his wife leave together, shouldn't they bring their own kids?
but they're not. It says the wife and her children belong to the master, and if he wants to leave, he leaves alone because they don't belong to him. The wife does not belong to him, and usually the children stay with the wife. The
Oh,
husband,
I didn't understand. Okay,
yeah.
but I thought he leaves with his wife. Oh, you're saying if the master had,
Miriam, listen.
okay, I'm trying.
If a master gave him a wife, now the wife belongs to the home,
Right, right, right.
and then she had children, the husband is not going to take the children because usually the men didn't take care of
No, no,
children.
but I thought it's okay.
Okay. But if the slave says, I love my master and my wife and my children, I don't want to go free, then the master shall take him before God. Or here again, we're going to see how often it says Elohim. This could be judges. And I think in this case, it's judges. They shall take him before the judges, and he shall be brought to the door or the doorpost, and the master shall pierce his ear with an awl, and he then shall remain. That was a sign of slavery. So then he's going to stay there. It's his choice. He's free to leave and he's free to go.
That makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, and the slaves can exercise their God-given. They also have the gift of free will. They could stay or go. Now, when a parent, here it says more precisely participant. It doesn't say actually parent. It says ish. When a man um, sells a daughter as a slave. Now, there are still countries where they do that, but it's not something that God liked. But he made a way for justice to be, even for that daughter who had absolutely no value in at that time. If a man sells his daughter as a slave, she shall not go free, as other slaves do. If she proves to be displeasing to her master, who designated her for himself, it's as if he married her. He chose her. He must let her be redeemed. If he doesn't like her, he's got to let her go free. He does not have the right to sell her to anyone from the outside, since he's the one who broke faith with her. So we see that even up till today, there are parents in some countries who sell their daughters. They have no rights. I've heard stories where it's so bad, especially in the Muslim community, that these young girls commit suicide. Torah gives these daughters the same right as a free woman given in marriage.
You know what's really incredible about this? This to me is a real clear picture of the fact that God has given us free will. Because otherwise, I mean, he's allowing us to change slowly, and that's means about that we're allowed to use our free will and slowly get to see when something is wrong.
Right.
But this whole idea of having human slaves, etc., it's easy to say, well, how could God allow this? But he's allowing them to have free will. They've chose to imitate the surrounding societies and set up a society with human slaves.
Right.
But he's still, yeah, it's quite amazing.
Yeah, this whole idea of slavery is so important because we had just been slaves that were set free from Egypt.
Right.
We could not exercise free will in any way.
Right.
So God is showing an opposite way of living.
But even that's what I'm saying, even in the limited way, God is allowing free will, because otherwise we'd just say this is wrong, that's wrong, etc., even the sacrifices, but he's allowing them to change slowly, but still using their free will.
Right. And look what he does here. And if the slave owner, the master, took her and gave him as a wife to his son, he shall deal with her as is the practice of free maidens. So now she's become a free person, married to his son. But if he takes another woman as his wife, he must not withhold from this one her food, her clothing, and her conjugal rights. So he's showing what rights she has, even though she came as a slave. And if he fails her in these three ways, she goes free, and she doesn't have to, there's no payment that someone doesn't have to buy her. It's beautiful. Now here we see the sixth commandment. This is about murder. One who fatally strikes another party shall be put to death. Has the understanding, if it's going to be put to death, it means that there was premeditation here. Because it says in the next verse, if a man did so but not by design, in other words, it was an accident, or it came about by God's hand, but an act of God, I will assign you a place to which you can flee. Later on, we're going to learn about these refuge, cities of refuge. If the justice system had this in place today, if we had a just justice system where those who committed these offenses that were deserved death, we would not have these prisons filled with people, murderers. And if we had these refuge cities of refuge, there would be places where these people could go to, where they're safe from the families who may want to take vengeance on them. When one person schemes against another and kills through treachery, again, this is premeditated murder. You shall take the person from my altar to be put to death. Now, this his altar, we read in the last verses of Yitro, where God asked us to build an altar, because at that time with idolatry, people had altars everywhere. Like every time you go into a Chinese restaurant, you'll see a little altar there, a Buddha with people putting in money, and there's fruit there to feed their gods. But God said, no, you will only come and worship me where I show you, in one place. So not everybody's building their own little altars. One who strikes father or mother shall be put to death. Again, we see that thou shalt not murder, especially father and mother. That's a double whammy. One who kidnaps another party, whether having sold or still holding the victim, shall be put to death. When I look at the kidnapping that took place since October last year, October 7th, and this week specifically, where we've heard that those three, remember those two kids with those redhead kids with their mother, Shear, and the two children, that they had died. These kidnappers deserve death. And that's what they're getting. That's what they're asking for, and that's what they're getting. And they certainly deserve it according to the Ten Commandments. One who insults father or mother, and I think the word is more than insult. Here it's because if you look at the word is mikalel. Klala is a curse. One who curses his mother and father is breaking the fifth commandment and is murdering them. So they need to be put to death. It's like killing their character. We need to honor our mother and father. We can see how all these relate to the Ten Commandments. Those are the basis. That's the pact that God made with us. When two parties quarrel and one strikes the other with a stone or a fist, and the victim doesn't die but has to take to his bed, then the victim, he gets up and he walks outside with his staff or his cane. The person who hit him goes unpunished, except, you see the justice here, because that man can't work, and he needs to get whatever he needs for healing, except for paying for the idleness, which means for this time off work, and rofe, for his healing, which is only just. It's fair. If someone does something today, you need insurance for that, because most people can't afford to pay, not always even for their own healing, but for the healing of others. That's why we have insurance. But in those days, the people would have to pay. When a slave-owning party strikes a slave, male or female, with a rod, who dies then and there, this must be avenged. So we know that God says vengeance is mine, but he's telling us it has to be avenged. But if the victim survives a day or two, then it's not a day, because it says, or two, it says, im yom o yamim. So it's day or days. So it's an indeterminate amount of time. This is not to be avenged, because in this there's hope for healing. So the victim is not dead, since the one is the other's property. When two or more parties fight, and one of them pushes a pregnant woman, and she miscarries, but there's no other damages, the one who did that, the one who pushed, needs to be fined according to what the husband thinks that it's worth, and the payment is based upon reckoning. So let me see, what did I write about that? No, I didn't write anything. But you can see that it's up to the judges. Again, they would go to the judges. Here, the reckoning, if you look at here, as the judges determine. So this case is brought before the court. They examine the situation. Each one has to be judged according to, like we said before, not on precedents, but on what is decided by the court. But if other damage ensues, the penalty shall be life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise. Now, this is not saying that, this is talking about justice. It's not talking about, well, if somebody pushes out your tooth by accident, then you have a right to push out his tooth because you're just going to have two toothless people, which is stupid. The whole idea is that there needs to be justice, and things need to be just and and measured in just measure. That's how it has to be judged. It's demonstrating fairness. We know the nature of man. They get into fights. And it's only fair that if one injured the other, the injury must compensate him for loss of work, cost of healing, and whatever it's going to be. Okay, where am I here? Yeah, these are all cases for a just system of law. Each measure of payment must be exacted when judging a case. Like when you think of when we read about debtor's prison in Old England, if a person owed money, how could debtor's prison help? What they could do is give him work until his payments could be met. That would be more just. When a slave-owning party strikes the eye of a slave, male or female, and destroys it, that person shall let the slave go free on account of the eye. If the owner knocks at the tooth of a slave, male or female, that person shall let the slave go free on account of the tooth. When an ox gores a man or woman to death, the ox shall be stoned, and its flesh shall not be eaten, but the owner of the ox is not to be punished. But if the ox was in the habit of goring, and its owner, even after it was warned, failed to guard this ox from hurting other people, and it kills a man or a woman, not only should the ox be stoned, but the owner too put to death. This is consequences, decisions. We are responsible for the decisions that we make, and this is extremely important in a just society. If ransom is imposed, the owner must pay whatever is imposed to redeem the owner's own life. So too, if the ox gores a minor, male or female, shall be dealt with according to the same rule. If the ox gores a slave, or male or female, its owner shall pay 30 shekels of silver to the master, and the ox shall be stoned. This was not a large amount of money for at the time. It was like the price for purchasing a slave, which was not very much. When the party opens a pit, and anyone who digs a pit and doesn't cover it, and an ox or a donkey falls in it, the one responsible for the pit must make restitution, paying the price to the owner, but keeping the dead animal. So we see it's constantly about making restitution. When you do something wrong, you have to make it right. Especially if it's unpremeditated, even when it's unpremeditated, especially if it is premeditated. And if it is, very often the consequences or death. When any party injures a neighbor's ox and it dies, they shall sell the live ox and divide its price. They shall also divide the dead animal. However, it's known that the ox was in the habit of goring and its owner failed to guard it. The person must restore ox for ox, but shall keep the dead animal. When any party steals an ox or a sheep and slaughters it or sells it, that person shall pay 5 oxen for the ox and 4 sheep for the sheep. So we see not only do they have to pay, they also have to pay interest. That was the system of interest when we make restitution. Chapter 22. If a thief is seized while tunneling and beaten to death, there's no blood guilt in that case. But if the sun had already risen, there is blood guilt in that case, and the thief must make restitution, and if lacking the means, he shall be sold for theft. Now, the idea of the sun had risen, it's a metaphor. If the fact is clear that he is peaceably disposed toward you, that's what it means. It's like the simile is just as the sun brings peace or happiness to the world, so it's evident to you that he did not come with the intention of killing. He came with the intention of stealing, but not killing, even if the owner of the property would resist him. Like when a father breaks in to steal the money of his son, it's certain that the father cherishes feelings or pity for a child, and the matter of taking human life is not in his thoughts. So this is how Rashi interprets this. But if what was stolen, whether an ox or a donkey or a sheep, is found alive and in hand, that person shall pay double. When any party who owns livestock lets it loose to graze in another land and so allows a field or a vineyard to be grazed bare, restitution must be made because they've destroyed that field or vineyard. These are showing that if you damage somebody else's property in any way, you must restore it. You must pay it back. When a fire is started and spread to thorns so that stacked, standing, or growing grain is consumed, the one who started the fire must make restitution. It reminded me of the fires in California. Who started them? Was it an act of God? Did someone start these? We saw pictures of people going out with what were they called? Like these fire spray guns. They were starting fires. They needed to pay restitution. For most, it was impossible. But if they caused a fire where they burned down someone's house, they should go to jail if they can't pay. When any party gives money or goods to another for safekeeping, and they are stolen from the other party's house, if caught, the thief shall pay double. If the thief is not caught, the owner of the house shall depose before the judges, again, Ha-Elohim, and deny laying hands on the other's property. In all charges of misappropriation, these are a little bit boring, but it's just showing us how much God wants justice for the widow, the orphan, and the stranger among us. Again, we're going to continue reading. Here it says, when a party gives to another a donkey, an ox, or a sheep, or another animal to guard, and it dies, or is injured, or is carried off with no witness, an oath before God shall decide between the two of them that the one has not laid hands on the party of the other. The owner must acquiesce and no restitution be made. You see, today, there's so many people who they don't care. They can swear all they want, but they don't believe in God and they don't believe in a higher power. So, but here, this is to a people who were learning who their God was, the creator of the universe. And they would go before just men, these judges, who were supposed to be chosen as men of God. So God has always played a part in our lives. And when that's taken away, you won't find justice. But if the animal was stolen from the guardian, restitution shall be made to its owner. If it was torn by beasts, the guardian shall bring it as evidence, not needing to replace what was torn by beasts. When any party borrows an animal from another and it dies or is injured, its owner, not being with it, restitution must be made. It's not enough to say, "Oh, I'm sorry." Restitution must be made. If somebody comes into your house and they break something, or they accidentally kill, knock something over and it kills your cat, restitution must be made. We have to pay back what we break or what we damage, what we destroyed. If its owner was with it, no restitution needs to be made. But if it was hired, that payment is due. If a man seduces a virgin for whom the bride price has not been paid and lies with her, he must make her his wife by payment of a bride price. If a father refuses to give her to him, he must still weigh out silver in according for the bride price for virgins. And then right after this, you shall not tolerate a sorceress. The scripture mentions the law of the sorceress after the law dealing with a seduced virgin, because those who lust desire to satisfy their cravings through magic. This is from Ibn Ezra. Scripture speaks of a sorceress because women practice sorcery more than men. Whoever lies with a beast shall be put to death. It first mentions the law of dealing with seductions of an immature young woman, and then it mentions intercourse with an animal. Unlike a woman cannot cry for help, it then mentions the law concerning a woman who can cry for help. Whoever sacrifices to a god other than Yud He Vav He shall be proscribed. The word for prescribed here is livado. Livado means alone, set apart, kicked out. Whoever sacrifices to, and here it says Elohim, it could be even making an offering to a human being, to an image, to anything else that is not Yud He Vav He, shall be set apart. They're not part of Israel. You shall not wrong or oppress a stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. This is something that has been implanted in the psyche of our people from the time we left Egypt. We are not to oppress strangers. We are not to oppress anyone. And the word is gerim, the stranger among us, because we were strangers. We were not born in the land of Egypt. We were just visiting there. Your communal leader shall not ill-treat any widow or orphan. This is very big in the Torah and throughout. We always had to take care of the widow, the orphan, and the children, and there's a lot of verses that talk about that. The responsibility for assisting and protecting widows and the fatherless was understood to rest upon the people who owned homes, the elders of the community, the priests, and the king, because it's our duty to take care of those who cannot take care of themselves. The Torah is completely opposite to this modern idea of take care of number one. It's not a single-minded idea. We are always to take care of the community, not only those who, the widows were helpless, children are helpless, and the stranger who's left everything to be with us and our God, they need to be helped. If you mistreat them, I will hear their outcry as soon as they cry out to me, and my anger shall blaze forth, and I will put you to the sword, and your own wives shall become widows, and your children orphans. You see, we say that we don't know why bad things happen to good people, so-called good people. People may look good on the outside, but we don't know what everyone does. You know, one of the things that the scripture says is that there's no one who's good. We all sin. Everybody makes mistakes, and everybody can hurt someone else when no one else is looking. So some of these people may have mistreated the widow, the orphan, and the stranger, maybe without realizing it, because they don't read the Torah, because something happens and it's more important for them to do that, and they find a way of justifying it. And when these things happen to them, it says, "My anger shall blaze forth, and I will put you to the sword."
This
So,
reminds me, maybe what I'm about to say is way more extreme, but was it Braveheart, in which, sometimes like the orphans or the strangers, the Gerim, weren't like considered as regular citizens, even though they were slaves too.
right, right.
But remember when when they would take the wife before she was with the husband?
Oh,
Was that
horrible.
That's horrible. That's probably an extreme, but just reminded me of that. They're mistreating, let's say, people in the land who are the lowest of the low, the
Right,
orphans, the widows, and the strangers.
right. And the consequences of this may not necessarily happen to the people who are doing it, but to following generations. We don't always know why certain people suffer, but something has happened in that line, in that lineage that will carry forward. Very often, these are spiritual things that are happening, and we don't always see it. But the Torah is very clear, at least to me. If you lend money to my people, to the chosen people, to the poor among you, do not charge interest. You're not a bank. You can't charge interest to them, which is why, again, I've mentioned this before, we have the free loan. But among us too, we need to help each other. And if someone is poor, help them, give them. If they can pay you back, great. Let them know you can pay me back, but never, we do not charge interest to our own. And remember, we left Egypt with the Erev Rav, the mixed multitude, the Ruths, the Calebs, those who left, who joined us because they saw what God did. They are part of us and they need to be treated exactly the same. And now we're going to see some of the things that God is telling us to do. If you take your neighbor's garment in pledge, return it to him before the sun sets. You know, he needs his garment to keep warm. It's the only available clothing he may have. It's what covers his skin. What else is your neighbor going to sleep in? And if that person cries out to me, I will pay heed, for I am compassionate. How many times do we hear in these other religions um, that our God is a God of vengeance and that he has no compassion? Here, he's saying, I am compassionate. I care about the smallest, the poorest of people. You know, they say we no longer live under the law, now we're under grace. What nonsense. You shall not revile God, nor put a curse upon a chieftain among your people. Um, and here, Elohim, you shall not, it says God, but again, I'm questioning whether it's God or the judges. Do not put curses on these judges or on the heads of your chieftains. They are given a role to lead. Do not put a curse on them, but honor the position. Now, this one here is interesting. You shall not put off skimming of the first yield of your vats. When you skim the top, like if you have a bottle of milk, what rises to the top is the cream, and it says don't. He's referring to giving the first fruits, giving the best back to God. giving, and when you go to someone's home, you bring your best. And here it continues with the same idea. You shall give me the male firstborn among your children, with your cattle, your flock. It's always, it's like God is saying, give me the first fruits of everything that you have, of your corn, your wine, your oil. And it makes sense that it's followed by the firstborn male, the calves, whatever. And then they're circumcised on the 8th day. 7 days, the male firstborn shall remain with its mother, and on the 8th day, we dedicate it to God. The firstborn male is given double inheritance, and this is referring, as you're going to see next, it's going to follow the same thought. You shall be a holy people to me. Israel is the firstborn of God among the nations. Doesn't mean they have more value, but it means that we are being set apart for a purpose. That's what kadosh means. It's holy, set apart, given to God for a reason. And we're going to be set apart in how we eat and how we dress and how we behave, so that when we go back to the nations, we're going to bring our God to them. You must not eat flesh torn by beasts in the field. You cast it to the dogs. This was one of the things that we're told not to do. Now here, this one here, we're going to chapter 23. This one is the 9th commandment. You must not bear false witness. Don't spread rumors. The media today is so guilty of this. It is a mess. You shall not join hands with the guilty to act as a malicious witness. We need a righteous justice system that does not allow the guilty to act as a malicious witness. You shall neither side with the very rich to do wrong. You shall not give perverse testimony in a dispute so as to pervert it in favor of the very wealthy, of the strong, the powerful. We hear so many stories of how people who have money get away with murder because they have the money, and we are not to do that. Nor shall you show deference to the poor person. Like, don't feel sorry just because someone's poor. If they did something wrong, they pay for it no matter whether they're rich or they're poor. It has to be equal measure. God wants balance in the justice system. When you encounter your enemy's ox or his donkey wandering, you must take it back. Look how compassionate God is. He's your enemy. And yet, we're not only to treat our friends and our neighbors and our relatives in a just way, but even our enemy, because we never know what will cause them to change his heart, to change his paradigm. When you see the donkey of your enemy lying under its burden and you don't help it get up, you must help it get up. You would don't refrain from raising it, help it get up and bring it back. You shall not subvert the rights of your needy in their disputes. Always bring justice, no matter how, whoever they are, rich or poor. Keep far from false charges. Do not bring death on those who are innocent and in the right, for I will not acquit the wrongdoer. If the justice system, if we do not bring justice to the innocent, God will. Something will happen in that family. Do not take bribes, for bribes blind the clear-sighted and upset the pleas of those who are in the right. Never allow money to make you blind. Always do the right thing, no matter what. And that's hard for us because we love money. You shall not oppress a stranger, the ger, for you know the feelings. You know what you went through. You were strangers in the land of Egypt. God will constantly be reminding us. And here he's going to talk about the Shemitah. 6 years you shall sow your land and gather in the crop. But in the 7th year, leave it alone. Let it lie fallow. Let the needy come and eat from it. Let the animals who are wandering around, let them come and eat from it. You shall do the same with your vineyard and your olive groves. And this is an issue of trust. Because in the 6th year, in the 7th year, God would tell us later on when he goes into this again, I'm going to provide enough for you in the 6th year that in the 7th year you'll have plenty. So store up. It was the same with the manna in the desert. He gave it on the Friday, on the 6th day, he gave us a double portion so we wouldn't have to work on the 7th. It's all about trust. And then we go into the Shabbat. 6 days shall you labor. On the 7th day, stop working, so that your animals may rest, that your slave who's born in your home may rest, and the stranger among you may be refreshed. This is because you're no longer a slave. Be on guard concerning all that I've told you. Listen carefully. Don't make mention of the names of any other gods. They shall not be heard on your lips. Don't call out to other gods. It's so easy for us to do these things. We forget how simple. I remember growing up, I used to walk around with a little rabbit's foot someone gave me. Mad, poor rabbit. How could a rabbit bring me good luck? I know it's it's not another God, but if you believe in something else other than God,
Only a living rabbit can bring you good luck. I'm
exactly.
joking, Clover.
I know. 3 times a year, hold a festival for me. You shall observe. Let me see what I wrote here. Hang on a second. Oh, yeah, here I was talking about the Shemitah. You know, we didn't keep the Shemitah and we were kicked out of our land. Wasn't the reason. There were plenty of other reasons. But the Hebrews were punished with 70 years of exile for the 70 Shemitah years that they didn't keep. And we can read that in 2 Chronicles 36, verse 21. And them that had escaped the sword carried away to Babylon. They were servants to him and his sons until the reign of the king of Persia, to fulfill the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah, until the land had been paid her Sabbaths. For as long as she lay desolate, she kept Sabbath to fulfill the 70 years. We had to learn to trust God. All right. Now, the Shalosh Regalim, so 3 times a year, we would make pilgrimage to Jerusalem. The Feast of Unleavened Bread, that's at the time of Pesach, where we ate unleavened bread for 7 days, as I've commanded you. At the set time, the Moedim, the appointed time in the month of Aviv, which is another word for spring. It's also the name of the month, Pesach, at Pesach. For in it you left Egypt, and no one shall appear before me empty-handed. If you're going to God at Pesach, bring an offering. The Feast of the Harvest, this was the Shavuot, the first fruits of your work for what you sow in the field, and Sukkot, the Feast of the Ingathering at the end of the year when you gather in. These were the 3 harvest times. God was providing for us. We need to remember that everything that we have, it's because God has provided for us, and we need to give back to him. You choose whatever place that you, today we don't travel 3 times a year, although we could, but there's no temple, there's no gathering place, although a lot of people do gather at Sukkot. But personally, I always give extra offerings at this time to my community, to the congregation, so that because we're working to bring the word of God out there. 3 times a year, all your males shall appear before God. You shall not offer the blood of my sacrifice with anything leavened. And the fat of my offering shall be not left lying until morning. It was the same idea as when we left Egypt. Nothing was left over that night. The choice first fruits of your soil you shall bring to the house of your God, the first fruits, and you shall not boil a kid in his mother's milk. We are a nation. We are firstborn. We are the first fruits among nations set apart by God, and we are not to partake in idolatry. This idea of boiling a calf in its mother's milk, I've said it again, we learned it from our rabbi. It had nothing to do with eating milk and meat, not eating milk and meat, even though he never did it because that's the way it was in his home when he was growing up. But it had nothing to do with it. It was a pagan ritual where the mother nursing the calf was wrenched away, boiled in its mother's milk, and this milk was fed to a woman who wanted to become pregnant. This was an idolatrous practice among the pagans, and we were not to do that. I am sending a messenger before you to guard you on the way, to bring you to the place that I have made ready. I love this because when I think of God here, God is sending an angel to guard Moses and the people to bring them to the land that he's going to prepare for us, that he has been preparing for us. Listen to him and obey him, since God's name is in him. Here, that's going to be in the next verse here. But when I think of this, I always, excuse me, I always feel that my way is being prepared, that God is guarding me on the way, and that he's opening doors for me. He prepares. This is not only nationally, but we can see this in our own lives. Pay heed to him. Listen to him. Do not defy him, for he will not pardon your offenses, since my name is in him.
Who do you think when he's saying this? I mean, I know that people would say this is Jesus or whatever, but when they
Now,
say
Christians say,
yes, and I mean the
they
Christians.
say that the angel is the pre-incarnation of Jesus in Christianity.
Right.
But if that's the case, if this is the angel, if this is Jesus, it says, do not, for he will not pardon your offenses, since my name is in him. But everybody says, Jesus forgave my sins.
Right. No, I don't think it's Jesus. I agree with you. But who is this? Do you think it's an angel?
I do. I think it's an angel. I think
Yeah,
it's
because
one of
that's
the angels.
yeah.
Yeah, because the angel can act as God's representative.
Right, right,
And obeying him means obeying God because he comes as his emissary.
right. It's like a yeah, right.
Because when it says my name is in him, it means a name of a person means their characteristics, everything that makes them up. So,
Or else also not only that, it it means that I am a messenger of that person. Like if you're an emissary or
like an ambassador
an
of a
ambassador,
country.
yeah, yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. And look what it says here. If you obey him and do all that I say, I, meaning God, I, will be an enemy to your enemy and a foe to your foes. If we obey and do all that he says, God will be an enemy to our enemy. What more do we need? We can't convince others not to hate us. We can't convince our enemies not to fight us like it's happening in the Middle East. But if we obey God, God will fight for us. How clear! Am I the only one seeing this? Anybody there?
Yes. No, I think that's beautiful.
It's off. It's so my messenger, my
Yeah,
my angel goes before you and bringing you to these are all the people who are our enemies. And
right.
look what it says. I annihilate them.
Wow.
I love it. He's going to do that. He's doing it anyway. But in the meantime, because we have so many of our own people who do not obey him, who do not obey the commandments. We've taken them out of our schools. We've taken them out of our courtrooms. We've taken them out of our homes, out of our lives, out of, then what do we want? Don't bow down to their gods and worship or follow their practices, but tear them down and smash their pillars to bits. Every time throughout the Tanakh, we read about a king who went in and tore down all the altars and the pillars and the sacred places of the pagans, and they were blessed. And then the next king came in and they built them up again. They built all those idolatrous places. Israel is filled with them today. And I hate to say it, but these places are like all those churches and the Baha'i temples, all to other gods, to foreign gods. People may not like to hear it, but God is saying that. Smash them down, take them out. I know we can't do that today. It would cause a world war, but God is going to do it. One day they'll be gone. You shall serve God, your God, Yud-He-Vav-He. He's the one who blesses your bread and your water. And look what he says here. I will remove sickness from your midst. He is our healer. He's the one who provides everything for us. We run all over the place looking for cures, looking for all kinds of things. I know I do. And I have to remember, God is the one. I have to look at how I'm living my life.
Yeah, that's true. It doesn't mean you don't go to a doctor, obviously.
No, you can go to a doctor. Of course, you can go to you take it or leave what he has to say, but you
Right.
find out what's going on, and then
Right.
you go to God with it.
Well, of course, even it's not only physical illnesses, it's any kind of imbalance in
Emotional, spiritual. Yeah,
spiritual.
we're a mess. No woman in your land shall miscarry or be barren. I will let you enjoy the full count of your days. We will live long, healthy lives. I will send forth my terror for you, and I will throw into panic all the people among whom you come, and I will make your enemies turn tail before you. Read some of the stories in the book of Joshua and the book of the judges, the kings. You'll see how God has done that for us time and time again and continues to do it. He's still doing it. I will send a plague ahead of you, the way he did with the Egyptians, and it shall drive out before you all our enemies, the Hivites, the Canaanites, the Hittites. I will not drive them out before you in a single year, lest the land become desolate and the wild beasts multiply to your hurt. So that while the people are still there, they're taking care of the wild beasts that are there. Remember, we're talking about the Middle East. I will drive them out before you little by little until you have increased and possessed the land. Even when we're dealing with our own illnesses, they don't know we're not healed in a moment. It's a process. Take little by little. And look at this, how beautiful. I will set your borders from the Sea of Reeds to the Sea of Philistia, from the wilderness of the Euphrates, for I will deliver the inhabitants of the land into your hands, and you will drive them out before you. He's giving them to us, but we have to go in there and drive them out. And when they're crying out today from the river to the sea, it's not for them, it's for Israel. But you shall make no covenant with them and their gods. They shall not remain in your land, lest they cause you to sin against me, for you will serve their gods, and it will prove a snare to you. This is very clear. The whole land that was apportioned to Israel, a lot of it doesn't belong to us right now. And we have allowed people in there who we've kicked our own people out and we've allowed them to take over. Look what happened in Gaza. They made a mess of that place. Then God said, come up to you, he said to Moses, come up to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. He's calling them up to the mountains, up to be with him, with Aaron and Nadab and Abihu, and 70 elders of Israel, and bow low from afar. So he's not. It doesn't mean he's going up to Mount Sinai yet. He just said, "Come with your Aaron and his sons, and 70 elders, and Yishtachaveh bow down. Moses alone shall come near the Lord, but the others shall not come near." Excuse me. Oh my goodness, forgive me. Nor shall the people come up with him. Here it looks like God. Well, let me continue a little more. Moses went and repeated to the people all the commands of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh and all the rules. And all the people answered with one voice, saying, "All the things that God has commanded, we will do." So Moses was telling them the commands, and this is going to be repeated again in verse 7. And then it says, Moses wrote down all the commands of God. So which commands did he write? Because I know God wrote the 10 Commandments. He hadn't gone up on Mount Sinai yet. So what were these, the rules and the regulations that we just read? Did he write those down? How long did it take him to write it?
Peggy, what do you mean, Exodus 20, what do you mean he hadn't been on Mount Sinai yet?
When in Exodus 20, he heard God spoke to all the people.
He didn't write them down.
He didn't, they weren't written in stone yet.
Okay.
God spoke to the people. That's when, remember when the people said, no, we don't want to hear the voice of God. You hear God's voice and you tell us.
Right.
But then he's continuing, and then we're reading all about these Mishpatim, all these things. God is still, I guess, telling him. They haven't been written yet. But here it says, then Moses wrote down. What did he write? And it says early in the morning, he set up an altar at the foot of the mountain with 12 pillars for the 12 tribes of Israel. And here it says he designated some, the word is na'arei, young men among the Israelites, and they made up burnt offerings and offerings of well-being, shalema. Here, see, shalamim, well-being. Moses took one part of the blood from the offering, put it in the basins, and the other part of the blood he sprinkled against the altar. Then he took a record of the covenant. It says here, Yikach, he took, Sefer, the book, Habrit, the covenant. The covenant were the Brit was the 10 Commandments. And he read them aloud to the people. And they said, all that our God, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, has spoken, we will faithfully do. We made that pledge. Our people made that pledge. And when we're not keeping our pledge, there are consequences. What we see going on in our community around the world is a consequence of our breaking our pledge. Moses took the blood and dashed it on the people and said, "This is the blood of the covenant that the Lord now makes with you concerning all these commands." A blood oath, everybody knows what a blood oath is. Richard, you wrote here, talk about Yeshua talking about an eye for an eye. Basically, what he said was that, in which context are you speaking? Because there was one context I was thinking of. Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, the way the new covenant is written, it makes it look like he makes um makes a distinction between um, how they were presented and opposed to how it should be. I'm like turn the other cheek. My understanding is that may I have something there? Okay, just talk to my wife. Uh, okay, so it's basically I've heard some rabbis say that the New Testament presents eye for an eye in a misleading way. So I'll just leave it at that.
But they're right, because he was pointing us back to the Torah. Yeshua always pointed us back to the Torah.
But I think he
Well,
meant exactly what you said about it.
It's
You
about
know,
justice.
what's this?
About
Yeah,
justice.
justice, and it doesn't mean paying back literally. If somebody slaps you, slap them back.
Right.
It's that there are consequences, and there are consequences,
Yeah.
which might mean whatever. Like you said, if somebody stole something of yours, they have to pay it back, and sometimes even with more money than they stole, let's say, or even whatever it is. But there are consequences, and
Right.
that's what Yeshua was saying. He wasn't saying anything different from the Torah.
Exactly.
well,
And
no, he was. Okay.
no, it's
Or at least that's the way that. Okay, I'm going to talk about this Saturday. Okay, we all
no,
have homework to
but
do.
Richard, one thing you have to understand about the New Testament is that it has been written and rewritten and rewritten and rewritten. There's about 6,000 manuscripts that have been passed through the ages. And whatever institution or whoever monk or whoever was rewriting it, the first book, I think the book of Mark that they found was written 90 years after the fact. So it's not like the Torah where we have found scrolls or the Isaiah scrolls that are word for word that have been preserved.
We'll talk about it Saturday. I have to go now. All right.
All right.
Well,
Okay. But the other thing is about somebody else had mentioned to me about, you know, one of the things that Yeshua said was, if you're, if you just think about it, it means that you're already guilty. And again, it's not what he's saying. What he's saying, if you keep thinking about something and you're ruminating about it over and over and over, eventually you're going to fail. You're going to
Also,
fall.
I think even more than that, I think in that context, because I remember a long time ago coming up, knowing about that, but I think the context was that righteous people, with some of the Pharisees in this case, some of them, not all of them at all, were saying that, I keep all the commandments. I'm very self-righteous, or the Sadducees were very self-righteous. And Yeshua was saying, just to break their arrogance, that even if you think this thing, you're guilty. Because otherwise, I mean, anyway, that's what I took from it, is that don't be so self-righteous to think you never sin at all. Even your thoughts are sins. So it's
Exactly.
not like
Yeah.
we can always have power over our thoughts. We would go nuts, but it's true. You do need to try and, change your thinking, but it's more to do with, I think, self-righteousness. Like, see, don't think you don't sin, because you do. Even your thoughts, you may think you never sin, but you do.
Exactly. And yeah, exactly. It's like a man who will look at a beautiful woman, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if he keeps looking and he keeps looking and looking away from his own wife, there the problems begin. Anyway, where are we here? Then Moses and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and the 70 elders ascended, and they saw.
Excuse me, I'd like to make a comment, Peggy.
Okay.
We have certain things. We have thoughts, speech, and action. Like Miriam was saying, your thought, you have your thoughts, you have your speech, and you have action. it's been my understanding that thinking about hurting someone, forbid, is yet not as sinful as carrying it out.
Exactly.
So the thought, so Miriam, I'm just taking a small exception that if you think about something, I mean, we can have certain thoughts, and you could easily control your thoughts afterwards. You can't, I don't think we can say because you think something, you could control it, you could reverse it. You don't have to think about it. If you say something, it's harder. And if you do something, it's impossible. But a thought you could change your thoughts easy. Because Miriam was mentioning that you sin with your thoughts as well.
Well,
But
no, what I meant, I didn't mean, let me just explain. I think you have to take the whole context. From what I understand is that Yeshua, Jesus, whatever, was talking to self-righteous people, talking to everybody, but also to some self-righteous people who thought that they never sinned because they never committed any sins. Like they kept all the commandments. And the point is that none of us could be self-righteous because we all do wrong in our actions, our thoughts, our deeds every day, even in small things. So I'm not saying that you have to like put I mean, that you have to put a cage and almost obsess about your thinking every second of the day. But just don't be arrogant and try and lead the best life you can, including in your thoughts.
yeah,
But don't
the only
think
thing
that you never do anything wrong.
the only thing is, it's very important. These three things: thought, speech, and action, are very significant things. However, like if you hurt someone in action, you cannot reverse it. If you say something as well, it's very hard to reverse. But thinking is
But actions begin with the thinking, and that's where the thinking has to be controlled. That's
right.
what we're saying.
Okay, but what I'm saying is no, because it was mentioned that the thinking in itself is a sin, but it's not equal to an action, because
No.
you can really curb the sin. You can change it, so you can, and as you said, Peggy, you can control it. You can control it easier, because I think I'm not sure. Some people said thinking in your mind is a gross sin. I think it's let's put it this way: it's something that can be more easily reversed.
Yes, it can be if we take the time to do that.
Well,
Because if we don't,
but we do that constantly.
yes,
We are constantly thinking. You mentioned something with money, for example. People constantly think, "Oh, I'd like to have this, or I'd like to have that," and that's bordering on coveting. But you can say, well, that person has this, or that person has that, and you can say, well, he's a good person. Let him have it. Let him be well. So originally you thought he has it, but you didn't. It's easy to cover that negativity.
yes, and we have a choice of what we're going to do with that. There's some people who say they would like to have what somebody else has, and they may even be jealous, but they'll say, you know what? I can go out and work for it, and I can earn and go and buy it. Someone else will turn that same thought into, I deserve it as much as they do. Why do they have it? I should have it. I'm going to take it from them. So it started with the same thought, but it again, one is coming from the Yetzer Hara, one's coming from the Yetzer Hatov. We're constantly having to decide what we do with our thoughts.
You see, Peggy, what you just mentioned, the thoughts can easily enter your mind, even as you're in your explanation. As you said that, you can say, I would like to have what that person has. And I think as human beings, it's natural to say that, but the first thing that comes into your mind, for example, well, I'd like to have what they have. And then you fix that by saying, well, if I really want it, well, then I can go do something about it.
Right.
So what I'm saying is the first thought that comes into your mind that you want something that someone else has, it's a precursor to a thought and something that can be controlled. So I'm just answering what Miriam, forgive us all, that we could control a thought if we choose to. We could control that, and we can't control all the things that come into our mind, so that we just have to parry them,
Right. We're bombarded these days with all kinds of things. The marketing industry uses the industry that wants us to have things uses that very well. We see that on the social media. Okay. Are we here? So they ascended and they saw, it says, they saw the God of Israel.
This is one of my favorite verses.
Can you read it? Because I'm choking to death
Oh, yeah,
here.
okay. And they saw the God of Israel, under whose feet was the likeness of pavement of a
I can't hear you, Miriam.
Was the likeness of a pavement of sapphire, like the very sky for purity. Yet God did not raise a hand against the leaders of the Israelites. They beheld God, and they ate and drank. Hashem said to Moses, "Come up to me on the mountain and wait there, and I will give you the stone tablets with the teachings and commandments which I have inscribed to instruct them." So Moses and his attendant Joshua arose, and Moses ascended the mountain of God. To the elders he had said, "Wait here for us until we return to you. You have Aaron and Hur with you. Let anyone who has a legal matter approach them." When Moses had ascended the mountain, the cloud covered the mountain. The presence of Hashem abode on Mount Sinai, and the cloud hid it for 6 days. On the seventh day, God called to Moses from the midst of the cloud. Now the presence of Hashem appeared in the sight of the Israelites as a consuming fire on the top of the mountain. Moses went inside the cloud and ascended the mountain, and Moses remained on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights.
Wow, how amazing this is. You know, when I was reading that about the sapphire, I remember, where is it here? In the book of Ezekiel, it talked about a vision that he had. The same, he saw the vision of a sapphire stone in the form of a throne. And this one here, verse 11, it says, the nobles, Hatzilei, sons of Israel, they ate and they drank. You know, they saw God. I don't know what they saw. It says, Et ha-Elohim. And they ate and they drank, and he didn't lay a hand on the nobles of the people of Israel. They saw God and they ate and they drank. So they must have seen some manifestation of God at that time. And
maybe all
yet,
the fire, through the fire, I don't know.
yeah, and it's amazing how with everything they saw, they still for the next 38 years in the desert would constantly complain and fear and be tested. It just shows us what a difficult life it is, eh? We have moments of seeing that sapphire river, city, stone, whatever it is, the magnificence of God. And when he opens doors for us, when things happen and we know he's with us, we have this sense of it. I get that it's like an all-consuming sense of humility of like, wow, there is a God and he's with me and he's taking care of me and no matter what's going on, I'm okay. And then the next day we could be afraid. And
Well, I know sorry,
yeah,
my cousin who had such an intense experience of God, and she didn't really believe, she didn't know if she believed or she didn't. She was like looking all over the place. I think I told you when she was in the hospital and she thought she may not ever walk again. One of the nurses from Jamaica, anyway, came over to her, and because she was crying and she was just in despair because she was losing a lot of her abilities to also anyway. And this nurse or one of the workers, whatever, she started to sing. She just started to sing with Judy, like some hymn, I don't know, some Christian hymn or whatever. And she was just held her. She says, "Can I hold your hand and pray?" And she held her hand, and like a heat, like a beautiful heat went up her arm and through her body. And, she said it was unbelievable. She felt God's presence. And now she's so, maybe there's no God, what's all it? And I keep reminding her, so you've told me what happened, how special that it changed her life.
yeah,
But like now she's like, so I mean, we have to constantly renew our
we
relationship
do.
with God.
It's true. It reminds me of the the 10 lepers who went to Yeshua asking to be healed. And he did. He healed them. And then he said, "But do what is the right thing to do. Go and present yourself at the temple to the Kohanim, to the priests there. Let them examine you and do what the things you need to do." And only one did. All the rest went on their way. All these people who say, "Oh, you just need signs and wonders and everybody will believe." It's no. There's something so much more. I don't know what it is. There needs to be a willingness of heart to be obedient. All that you do, all that you say, we will do. And it's just it's always a two-sided coin in every area. Like, um, the more I look at the Torah, the less I understand. The less faith is something that we all have, but it takes a lot of work to turn that faith into trust.
I think
I'm going to rephrase that comment that you made, Peggy.
Yeah,
The more you look at the Torah and the more you know, the more you realize how much more you don't know.
that's right. But that's absolutely true.
Not that you don't understand. You're understanding more. You're understanding more that there's so much more.
Yeah, that's very true. Your hand's in front of something there, Jerry, is in front of your camera. There you go.
Unhand me.
Unhand you. But you're right about the thoughts. And that's in every area of our lives. We don't realize the power of our thoughts. And I'm learning that more and more, when it comes to healing, to our health, the things that we say to each other, to ourselves. Somebody said to me, "Don't believe everything you think."
yeah.
Yeah. Because we think wrong thoughts about ourselves, like, someone who's has these fears, or I'm watching someone who's going through tremendous anxieties right now, and the more anxious he gets about something very simple, the worse and worse he gets, and refusing to take control of the thoughts. So,
How does one control their anxieties is not really your thing, but I understand everyone has stress and anxieties. How come?
well, because we're forgetting to trust God. We're not living in the moment. We're living either in the past or the future, worrying about what's going to come, or the mistakes, or drowning in the mistakes that we made in the past. We're not forgiving ourselves, and it's a daily task. Every single day, and it's about communication talking to people who believe in God, helping each other when we're in a funk about something.
You're
And then
frozen, Peggy. Now you're not.
yeah, I see that in yours too. You're
Oh, I'm
constantly freezing
frozen?
and unfreezing. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Jerry, do you see us freezing?
No.
Okay.
I guess what's interesting also scientifically, I've said this before, I don't know if I said it here, that scientifically, the thought in your brain, whatever it is, dog, cat, anything, feelings about what you believe about a person, or anything, the thought comes like a millisecond or even faster than a millisecond before the emotion. You're even despair and anger, you would think, I used to say, oh, it's so intense, it's the emotions come first, but
Oh, there you go again. Yeah, well, while we're waiting for Miriam to come back, there are therapies. Like there's a therapy that I lost you for a long time there,
I
Miriam.
lost you too just now. Okay.
Yeah, it's you're
Did you hear me
freezing.
though?
I
Yes, now we
I
hear you. Now we hear you.
Oh,
now
you
we hear
didn't
you,
hear me
but
before?
no.
Well, we heard you with the thoughts and the emotion. And Miriam, too, there's another study, a Kabbalah study, which talks about the attributes of a person. And they talk about three attributes, which are from the intellect. They call that the mothers, and seven attributes, which are the daughters, which they call that the emotion. And what you said is exact. The thoughts give rise to the emotion. It originates with the thoughts. However, and so what you said was very, very significant. I haven't heard that exactly. That you felt it. So the thought goes to the emotion. Somehow, sometimes, even though the thought gives birth to the emotion can rise so high that it takes the emotion will outdo and outride the thought from which it came.
Yes, but one of the things, could you hear me?
You
Yes,
know
we,
what? Turn off your camera because I think right until you get it fixed, it's taking too much. Oh, okay.
Could you hear me now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, just quickly, just in the realm of psychotherapy, when people go with depression, anxiety, etc., to a therapist, and they go to what's called a cognitive behavioral therapist, their whole premise is that you've changed a person's thoughts, and I'm not saying the healing starts right away, like overnight, doesn't take overnight, but your healing does begin with the thoughts. Like so much of depression is, for example, self-hatred and saying negative things about yourself. I'm not good enough, I'm worthless. And they deal with these false thinking patterns, and that does change the emotions. It doesn't mean it's a quick fix. It takes time and persistence, but it really makes sense to me.
Yeah. It's a lifetime of going. If you're looking at the past, it's to try to find the root of whatever is causing you the misery for today, and looking back at it from a different perspective. First of all, with God, God allowed you to go through it for a reason. There are, and each situation can have a paradigm shift. And when you shift the paradigm in that, something emotionally and physically changes in your system. I've seen it over and over. It's a constant work, but it's like what the Israelites had to go through in the desert. Constant testing. God says, I allowed you to go through these things because I was testing you to see if you would trust me, if you would follow me, if you would be with me. So the things that we're reading in the Torah are pictures for us to learn. If a person is, let's say, always afraid that they're going to be sick, that they're I see a lot of people who get attention, a lot of attention when they're sick. When they're well, they don't get any attention. And this happens from the time they're very young. When they get a lot of attention when they're sick, somehow they veer toward that. Oh, they're paying attention to me. It's a lot of unconscious thoughts going on. But you have to grab that and say, no, I'm not going to buy into that anymore. We do that in every aspect of and every area of our life, to the point I think where, because we're a physical body covered by a spiritual body. I mean, a spiritual body covered over with the physical. The physical in itself has no life. It's the spirit that gave us life. God's breath that he breathed into us, that gives us life. And the spirit controls the emotional and the physical. So there are three aspects in everything that we want to heal in our life: physical, the emotional.
Peggy, that's a very interesting thought. And the thought is that people will tend to help people who are having a difficult time more than a person, like they'll help a poor person more than a rich person, not realizing the rich person could have stresses as well. So, and just what's said in previously, that if you have a poor person or something, you shall not judge in their favor just because of the fact that they happen to be poor.
Right. Right. Exactly. Well, the other thing to know is that we can never be perfect, to learn to accept ourselves as we are, but we can improve. We can get better all the time. Just because we're getting older doesn't mean we're not getting better. I've learned more wisdom. We can have wisdom, but wisdom comes from God. And so there's really, it helps us in every aspect of our lives. It's
There are
really,
many poems written about that as we get older, we take on the understanding and wisdom. That's one of the things
hopefully.
that we get. Well, hopefully, yes, exactly.
Yeah. When you're walking with God, when you allow yourself to walk with him, when he calls you and you say yes to God, we can't separate ourselves from him, because it's separating ourselves from the innermost part of our being. He put a piece of paradise, he put a piece of eternity in the soul of every human being.
Yeah, if I was a singer, I would sing that song.
Which
When
one?
you walk through a cloud, hold your head up high, and
And don't
be.
don't be afraid of the dark.
Well, you sound better than I did. Go ahead.
At the end of the storm is a golden light, and the sweet silver sign of a lark.
Walk on.
Walk on with the rain, walk on in the wind, though your dreams be tossed and blown. Walk on with hope in your heart, and you'll never walk alone. You'll never walk alone.
I'm not even trying to keep the melody. I'm just playing the bass part to it, which suits our harmonizing. So I have an excuse not to be in the melody.
Exactly. You know what? That's the thing we have to remember, is we are not alone. We can feel alone in the biggest
And
crowd.
one of the things you're always saying, we each have what do you say? We each have
A purpose,
our purpose, but you have a word for that you
a
always use.
calling, a role.
Role. That's right. We each have our role. Yeah.
We all do. And it may be a very small role, but it's as important as the largest role.
Yeah. And small role by me singing and my tone, your melodic singing was more emphasized.
Aha, you see? You see? Well,
And I think this is important. One of the main things about study is basimcha, and the singing is very important. And you are blessed by Hashem that you could bring so much delight to people, Peggy. And it's always nice to hear you sing.
Thank you.
Sing when you're feeling blue. Sing, that's the thing to do. Da-da-da-da-dee-da-da.
You'll, oh yeah, that's an oldie but goodie. Yeah, music is marvelous. I love it, and I sing every day. Sometimes I just sing, like I'll be talking to myself or talking to God, and I'll just sing it.
Now, if you
Just
want to talk to someone you're singing, you can call me and sing. I'll be happy to hear you.
good. Okay.
I was reading an account of I think she was I think she's a doctor. I don't remember, but something, and she was an atheist, a scientist, and she kept saying, she said, I'm a scientist. I'm a rational, logical person, scientist. And she had some sort of thing happen to her, and she died on the operating table for I don't know how long, 7 minutes, 10 minutes. And just because we're talking about singing, she said one part of the experience she had, she said the music of everything, of life, the music of life, from plants, from everything.
Wow.
She
Wow.
said, I can't ever describe. She said, there are no words, there's no music that can compare. She said it was just magnificent.
Wow.
Just talking about music of the spheres.
Wow, amazing. Yeah, well, they say that those who've been out to an outer space that there's music in the celestials.
Oh, literally? You mean
Literally,
the
there's
astronauts?
yeah,
They
there's
heard music.
yeah, there's music out there. You
That
never heard
must be
that?
beautiful.
Yeah,
Wow.
there's so much we don't know. It's marvelous, absolutely marvelous. For us to be so proud to think we have all the answers. How
Right.
foolish. Yeah. Well, thank you again, Miriam and Jerry. Thank you for your input. And Richie for
Baruch.
his input. It's interesting that the rabbis are talking about Jesus.
Yeah.
What they don't understand is that Jesus Christ that the Christians have is not the same as our Rabbi Yeshua.
No.
A very different character. And he always wanted us to come back to the Torah. And that's what we're saying. Come back to the
You're
written Torah.
frozen again. Okay.
Yeah.
That I
Yeah.
hear you.
All right, my friends. Have a good evening. And I
You
wish you
too.
Shabbat
Thank you
Shalom.
very much.
You're welcome. And
Goodbye, Jerry. Have a good
Shalom.
Okay,
week.
Miriam.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. We're on Shabbat.
Right.
Bye.
Bye.